Good evening. I am Council President Nick Mosby. Today I'll be chairing the Committee of the Whole. We're going to talk to the Minority and Women Business Opportunity Office to provide them with the opportunity to brief the Council on procedures, process, recommendations on how to further pursue and establish equity as it relates to city contracts. This has been a hallmark, one of the hallmarks of this administration and this council, not just for myself, but many other members, ensuring that folks have a seat at the table. When we look at the amount of contracts that come through our city, we know that more reflective and more diverse vendor pool provides better outcomes for citizens of Baltimore as well as our communities. We also know that many of the practices and procedures and things that have been set forth all the way from procurement through the Board of Estimates process. There's a lot of best practices that are out there that this council is even taking action on as we speak to try to bring the procurement and vendor process that's a more equitable process into the 21st century. So today's a really important discussion. Director Lundy is on. He is head of the MWBOO office, extremely competent, extremely responsive, and we look forward to hearing his testimony. Also joining me from the council, I see we have Chairwoman McCray, Chairman Conway, Councilwoman Porter, Councilwoman Ramos, Councilman Glover, Councilman Cohen, Councilman Dorsey, from the office, and Vice President Middleton. I believe I have all council members so far. Councilman Burnett, I believe I have all council members so far. Yes, and then from the mayor's office, we have Natasha Mehu from Mayor's Office of Government Relations, as well as Nina Themelis. We have from also the mayor's office, Paul Taylor, and of course, I've already spoken about Director Lundy. From the council president's office, we have Nathan Poole. And that's it. And hosting us today from Legislative Services is Mr. Larry Green. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Lundy. Chief Lundy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, President Mosby. I really appreciate the opportunity to address you and the council. Director Green, am I able to share my screen at this time?
Okay, let me do that right now. Okay.
Okay. Thank you again, President Mosby, Vice President Middleton, and honorable members of the council. I truly appreciate this opportunity to address you all to talk more about the Minority and Women's Business Opportunity Office. My office is governed primarily by the code, and we're grounded in equity in the procurement process, specifically Article 5, Subtitle 28. And this subtitle governs the MWBOO office and all of our operations, and it specifically speaks to the Minority Business Enterprises, MBE, Women's Business Enterprises, WBE, and the Small Local Business Enterprises, SLBE. This is applicable to all city contracts. And what this does with our program is it works to remedy past inequities in the city's procurement process. We unfortunately had a situation where prime contractors would purposefully not work with minority and women-owned businesses. And this has now led to a significant underutilization of minority and women-owned businesses in all of the city major contracting markets. This is construction, commodities, architectural, engineering, and professional services. So as a result, the code now mandates that all city contracts incorporate this chapter by reference and provide that any failure by whether that be a bidder before they're awarded a contractor while it's ongoing, or a subcontractor in the performance of the contract, that any violations is actually considered a material breach of contract. And during this term, we require that every contractor fulfill whatever commitments that they submitted with their bids. We'll get into the details of that, but when they bid, they actually indicate what subcontractors will be working on the contract. And throughout that performance, they have to make good faith efforts to utilize these businesses and maintain the necessary records so we can judge that compliance. So to make this program legally sustainable, it has to be narrowly tailored. So we do that in a way by setting by setting goals on these contracts, not just broadly across all of them, but we do an individualized analysis on a contract by contract basis. We also look to remedy only what's the businesses that have been affected. So that's limited to our Baltimore City market area. And we also do a review of the need for this subtitle ongoing with the disparity study. The most recent disparity study was in 2007. And at that time, they found, based on the available vendor data, that there still was a persistent, pervasive, and statistically significant disparity that's placed upon these businesses. We do have an ongoing disparity study right now that's being conducted by MGT. And they, for the first time, obviously they're looking at updated vendor data from the prior study, but they're for the first time going to be also evaluating LGBTQ and veteran-owned businesses to determine if there's been any disparity on them in our marketplace. And you can get additional information about the disparity study. And if you are a vendor that have done business with the city, you can also do a vendor survey if you go to the website of City of Baltimore-HABCDisparitystudy.com. So what specifically are MBEs and WBEs? When we talk about minority business enterprises, MBEs is defined as African American, Hispanic American, Asian American, or Native American owned businesses. And WBEs, of course, are women-owned businesses, but it does include non-minority women, as well as women that fit into any of the above stated MBE minority classes. And if it is a minority female business, it would be an M/WBE, and they would be certified as both. Unfortunately, at this time, nonprofits are ineligible for certification. This is due to the fact that the code defines a business enterprise as a legal entity operated for profit. So as a result of that definition, they are not eligible for certification.
Is that unique to Baltimore, or has there been other instances in other places that have codified other language around the nonprofits?
That is something that in other jurisdictions they have codified so that nonprofits are available for certification. And that definition is the only thing that would prevent certification in our jurisdiction, because it would be possible for a nonprofit to satisfy all the other criteria for certification. So whenever you have a business, we spoke of M/WBE. If you have a business that is certified in more than one category, they can only be designated to count in one towards one goal per contract. So if they're a minority and a women-owned business, they would have to count towards one of those particular goals. There is also a limitation on subcontracting additional percentages. If you are MBE or WBE subcontractor, you cannot then subcontract away more than 10% of the work. And that's really for the protection of the subcontractors so that they get that 90% at minimum of work under that contract. So when we turn to the primary duties, of course, one of our first and foremost duties is certifying and maintaining a directory of certified businesses of the MBEs, WBEs. We set participation goals and evaluate any waivers of those goals. We review any sort of participation forms for those bids before they go to the Board of Estimates or BOE for approval. We conduct contract compliance reviews, and this is once contracts have been awarded by the Board of Estimates at the time that they have any further action for extensions, amendments, or renewals. And we're working in conjunction with the agency partners to draft contracts to look at those scopes of work and specifications, and also monitoring for utilization.
Chiefundy.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
I'm sorry. Never mind, I'm sorry.
We also engage in conciliation meetings with contractors. We do that in collaboration with the agency if there's any sort of violations of the subtitle and questions about utilization. A key also is investigations for, broadly speaking, for any sort of violations of the subtitle. But specifically, we're investigating at the time of certification and renewal to ensure that the business properly actually should be eligible for certification. And also if there's any concerns that are raised during the course of the contract, whether that be from the actual subcontractor saying that they haven't been utilized and given enough work, or the agency that's monitoring and saying there's a problem. In either of those events, we really work to make sure we're in collaboration with the agency, speak to the project manager, and have conversations to really determine what is at the root of that lack of participation. Agency trainings is something that we've been doing recently, really to familiarize everybody with their role under the code and ways that we can really collaborate and get greater participation. Also assisting MBEs and WBEs. We've been doing training for them as well, so they can see if they are not certified, the benefits of becoming certified with the city, and also procedures so that they can make sure they're compliant and able to work on these contracts when available. Besides the MBE community, the business community as a whole, we're also engaging them for feedback on how the MWBOO office can greater serve the business community and the city as a whole, and continuing to try to improve our maintenance of data collection regarding certification and compliance. Our current staff, we have 7 permanent positions. Myself, my Deputy Chief Stephen Campbell. We have 2, soon to be 3 compliance officers. An investigator, and we currently have a vacant program assistant 2 position. That's a position that's about to be advertised sometime in the very near future. Since I've joined on, we also have added 2 application compliance officers, and they've been very much of great assistance in trying to work on the backlog of applications and really processing things as timely as possible. I do have to say we're a small team, but they really are excellent and dedicated to the work and sharing my vision and passion for bringing greater MBE and WBE participation. And one of the things we're doing is President Mosby alluded to some of the national standards and things that are happening in other jurisdictions. We're in the process of undertaking a national comparative analysis of our staff size and resources compared to similarly sized jurisdictions to see where we fall as well. We work with agencies throughout the city. The primary agency that's responsible in the procurement process is, of course, the Bureau of Purchases, BOP. But we also work with agencies that are contracting on their own behalf and also that reach out for additional assistance, such as Department of Public Works, Transportation, Housing and Community Development, General Service, Baltimore City Information Technology, Rec and Parks, the Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs is responsible for the ARPA funds distribution and oversight, the Mayor's Office of Homeless Services, the Fire Department, also the Police Department. So with that being said, many of the things we look at, we've touched on goal setting, waivers, the bid participation forums, contract compliance reviews, and also emergency procurements. When things have to move quicker than our normal procurement process and they're able to get that approval, we're also reviewing those for participation. Right now, we're averaging about 45 requests solely from BOP. We're in the process of doing some improvements so that we can roll out a smart sheet for the remainder of the agencies that will more closely track all of the requests that come in and also provide a dashboard for the agencies to be able to see the status of their requests so there'd be less questions about where we are in the process.
Chiefundy, when do you expect the comparative analysis to be completed?
President, it's something that we're working on. I do anticipate completing it within the year, within the next month and a half. It's something that we've recently undertaken, but we are putting efforts into that so we can have as much information as quickly as possible as we get into the budgetary season and as we continue to make process improvements so we can really see where we are in the grand scheme of things.
That's great. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. You're welcome. So we obviously are under pressure to evaluate everything with great haste. We get a lot of requests, but we're reviewing everything in the order of receipt. That's the policy of the office. In fairness to the other agencies that have pending reviews that they're awaiting our analysis and determination. One of the things we do is we understand that there are things that are mission critical and services that will be interrupted if the contract does not get reviewed. So when people raise that situation as warranted, we will take additional action to make sure those things are addressed. But with that being said, we are trying to respond to everything as soon as practicable, and there's no need to generically label all requests as urgent. So the certification criteria, we touched on this earlier, but in order to be certified by my office, you must be a minority or woman-owned business with at least 51% of of ownership of the business and have that operational and managerial control. It's key to remember, though, that this is not just evidenced by day-to-day operations where you say, oh, well, the female owner, she does everything around here. It has to be borne out in your documents. So if you have a partnership, your partnership agreement, your articles of incorporation, it must show on paper that you actually have full control. If it shows that any other non-minority or non-female owner is able to exert the same or greater oversight than you have, you truly do not have that operational and managerial control. You also need to be an independent operating small business. Small is key to that because we do abide by the federal Small Business Administration size standards. So that looks at your gross receipts or number of employees, depending on what's applicable for the for that service code. And you need to be within those ramifications from the SBA. If you're too large, you will not be eligible for the program. You need to have been in operation for 12 months with that minority or female ownership prior to applying for certification. Oh, excuse me, jumping that too quick. And have an operating office in the Baltimore City market area. Our application is now submitted, it's now fully online on the website. You can complete it and submit it there. If you do have a pending renewal, please reach out if you haven't gotten into termination and your expiration date is upcoming so that we can provide you with an extension. Another key to note here is that MWBOO is not making any sort of, their certification does not rate or reflect the skills of the business. We simply are looking at the baseline qualifications for you to be in operation legally in Maryland to carry out that business so that you meet all these criteria, but that you also additionally have whatever requisite licenses that are required as well. And the market area is not just simply Baltimore City. It encompasses the surrounding counties. So that's also Baltimore, Anne Arundel, Carroll, Harford, Howard, and Queen Anne's County. A lot of people are unaware that it's beyond Baltimore City, but if you do have that valid operating office in any of those locations, you would, on that basis, at least be eligible for certification. The goal of our participation in pursuing greater equity within our city contracting process and the whole procurement process is not just simply tasked under the code to MWBOO. This is something that the code mandates that the agencies take part in as well. And we must keep in mind that agencies are our subject matter experts regarding whatever goods or services are seeking via the procurement. So we really need that communication and collaboration sometimes to understand what is at issue for the contract. But the agency should be looking at every contract pursuant to the code and making sure there's an ability to divide or segment the total requirements for that participation to subcontract to MBEs and WBEs. This duty is also placed upon the agency head or their designee to make sure that we're carrying out and achieving these goals. So it is something that is code mandated that we all take part in this process. We do have annual participation goals. Right now they are MBE 27% and WBE 10%. They are not universally applicable. As I said before, we do apply goals on a contract by contract basis. These are more so aspirational goals that allow us to evaluate the effectiveness of the program as a whole.
Chiefundy, do you have the ability of seeing where we are year to date, just in aggregate of the participation goals?
Unfortunately, I do not at this time, sir.
Is that a system issue?
It is. We are implementing process improvements so that we can have far greater data tracking. And I'm going to be alluding to it earlier, but also in our B2G diversity compliance monitoring software is going to be coming. It'll allow us a lot better data tracking about participation in real time. It will allow us to have better statistics on an ongoing basis to really judge, not just at the end of the year, but throughout the year where we are in that process.
And will that allow you to disaggregate it by agency and by discipline, by job type or anything like that?
I know that it'll definitely be able to give us the broad strokes. I'm unclear as to whether we'll be able to drill it down. We're still in the process of final configurations with the vendor right now. So that's definitely something that I'll look into and let them know that we definitely should be able to do that. That is our goal, to get as much particularized information as we can.
And if there's any way the council can participate in those discussions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. But disaggregating the data is important to us, particularly when we look at certain types of contracts we know historically, like the IT contracts consistently get waived. And I think there's a lot of opportunities, particularly in the Baltimore metropolitan area, to bring in a lot of vendors that weren't necessarily part of any market analysis in the past. So disaggregating it, not just by agency, but then also by the types of jobs inside of these agencies is really important to the council as well.
Yes, Mr. President. I appreciate your support, and I will definitely reach out if we need anything, and I completely agree with your sentiments there. These goals or waivers are normally on a contract for the entire term, and we would normally need to resolicit to get some sort of goals placed on it. We have been able to recently negotiate goals on contracts that had a pre-existing waiver via entering into a commitment to comply with those contract participation goals. And Mr. President, that's actually something we've been able to do on 2 occasions with BSID. So they have been an excellent partner in trying to get additional participation on their contracts.
Is that what we did with that Motorola extension?
Yes, Mr. President, that is correct. And we also did that recently on the contract for computer hardware. We were able to get the vendors to enter into a commitment to comply as well to use good faith efforts, even though they did have a pre-existing waiver. The code guides us with factors that we should consider when we're setting goals. It's included but not limited to, so these are just some of the things. But we're really looking at the available MBEs, WBEs for those services that are sought via the contract. Another important aspect is the level of utilization of the firms in the past. We were just speaking of this, but this is really one of the things we look at with the goals. Is this a contract that had poor performance, whether just be generally speaking or due to a waiver in the past, or is there something that we've been able to exceed those goals? And we use that as some aspect of a guidepost when we're setting goals. The contract specifications, any adverse impact on non-MBEs and WBEs. This one is limited in light of the legislative findings for the subtitle and also the findings of the recent disparity study and any other relevant factors. And with those other relevant factors, we do consult with the agency for other things that they may be aware of that may affect the ability to get participation. To drill down even further with goal calculations, again, we're putting goals on all contracts, private developments, capital developments, special agreements, barring a waiver. And we begin by consulting our certified directory to look at the number of firms that are available with that pre-qualification code service description. And we then utilize a spreadsheet that'll have a formula to calculate those goals with that pre-qualification code, the dollar amount, and the availability of those firms. If we lack the codes for whatever reason, we will then proceed with setting goals based on the dollar amount range of the contract. But we're really looking again to use the totality of the circumstances and that ability to segment the contract. There are some exclusions when we look to goals. There are things like salaries, profits and losses, taxes and interest. These are all things that either can't be segmented or are typically costs that are going to third parties with travel and utilities and things of that nature. I'm happy that we can now say goals may now be set on emergency procurements. Unfortunately, in the past, this is a great improvement with the new 2851B. The city saw that there was a gap in the program where previously an agency could just simply assert that there was an emergency and all requirements to get MBE and WBE participation on that procurement were waived. Now we are actually indicating and requiring that the agency reach out to my office and work to get participation even on emergency procurements. Even though there's a shorter turnaround, we're working with the agencies to try to identify MBEs and WBEs to either service primes or subcontractors on those agreements. And I've had great success so far with the agencies really being proactive and reaching out and really working to try to get participation on these types of procurements. When we turn to waivers, there is, of course, no guarantee of a waiver. I know in the past there's been some understanding that waivers would just be presumed to be in place. That is simply not the case. We're evaluating each of them individually and they're being highly scrutinized. We've been advising the agencies and training them that waivers should not be requested unless it's a federal or state pass-through contract that's not receiving city funds, so it's not city funded. if it's a sole source agreement, and the sole source is defined by the code. And what it means is that they would be the sole source for the goods or services that are available, and they're also qualified to do business with the city. A caveat about these first two is that they're really not waivers. They get grouped in with waivers, but the code actually prevents myself and my office from placing goals on them. So they're really exceptions, but I did want to address them here. Also, whenever we have services that can't be segmented or subcontracted. So if you have a contract that's limited to salary or fringe benefits, also when you have proprietary contracts where the goods or services are such that they're unique to that particular vendor or contractor, it's really impracticable because them having that niche within the market for us to then ask for additional subcontracting requirements. But we are still evaluating each of those individually. So when someone tries to get awarded a contract, they're going to submit a bid. And from the MWBOO standpoint, what we're looking for is that all of their documentation shows that they're able to meet or exceed the applicable goals that are on that contract. Any bid that does not show that they can reach the goals that are placed in the contract will be non-compliant. And any bid that does not include that certified business participation affidavit is non-responsive pursuant to the code. It is the bidder's responsibility to ensure every subcontractor that they list to get to those requisite goals has a valid MWBOO certification at the time of bid opening. And obviously, the first place to look is the certification directory. But if you have any further questions, you should definitely reach out to MWBOO with your questions or concerns. We cannot specifically assist someone in filling out their forms, but we do attend pre-bid meetings on a regular basis to provide all of the requisite information about the goals on that contract and answer any questions or concerns they may have. And if bidders have any additional questions that are submitted following that until bid closing, we will answer those when forwarded by the agency as well. Another way to keep in mind that you can achieve these goals is with credit for self-performance. If you are in fact already certified and serving as a prime, as an MBE or WBE, you can count up to that 50% of the dollar value of the work you intend to perform towards the applicable goal, but it cannot exceed the OBC, the Office of Boards and Commissions pre-qualification for your capacity to do that work. But that is another way that you can list and achieve the goals. Similar to agencies, the contractor and vendor can also apply for a waiver. So this can be done at 2 stages, pre-award when they're originally submitting the bid, and then also post-award if they receive the contract once they're in the performance stage. But really, we're analyzing them under the same lens in terms of what we're advising people to do. You need to start with the market research, which is at the minimum reviewing the certification database to see if there's available certified firms. Something that we're also emphasizing is that you don't just simply look at the scope of the contract, that you think about, as the code defines it, commercially useful functions. These are kind of like the ancillary functions under a contract that may not have been detailed and broken up within the scope of the specs of the contract, but they are in fact things that have to be undertaken. So say on a construction contract, it may be the fuel that's required, transportation of equipment to the site, large equipment, especially where they may need transportation. In other areas, it may be mailing or marketing. It's anything that has to be undertaken with the contract, whether it's specifically stated in that scope or not. And so long as it requires some oversight and skill and expertise from that subcontractor, that will also count towards your participation goal. And of course, before any waivers come in, we want them to have that conversation with both the agency and MWBOO to really discuss the difficulties they've been going through, because we want to make sure we're aware of that and can provide them assistance, because sometimes they may not be looking in the right place. They may not have been aware of the certification directory. We want to provide as much assistance as we can along the way. But I will say the bottom line is that you should not be seeking a waiver if there are certified firms that are available to provide the goods and or perform the services under the contract. So obviously the agencies are on the ground with their contracts. They're intimately familiar with them. They have project managers and contract management teams that are at the agency that are responsible for these contracts. These are all kind of red flag scenarios when they should reach out to MWBOO for potential intervention and assistance. The general, if they're not acting in conformity with the code, but more specifically, if they think that they're not going to achieve the goals. This may be a situation where the agency is monitoring the performance and has concerns about the capacity for the subcontractor and the prime to get there. That's something we can evaluate an addition of an additional firm onto that contract, or even a substitution if the utilization is due to a breakdown in the business relationship. Kind of along those same lines would be if there's a MBE or WBE who's not getting adequate work, even though it is being sent to the contractor from the agency. That's a situation where I really have to collaborate with the agency and have those discussions with the prime to determine what is really the result of the lack of work going to the subcontractor, and potentially putting them on a monitoring plan to make sure that I can get turned around in a timely fashion. If there's any payment disputes, or just untimely payment more so from the contractor to the subcontractor. We have a timely payment requirement under the code where all subcontractors have to be paid within 7 days of the prime contractor being paid by the city. But it only comes into play once the prime is paid. So it is important that the agency is looking out for both contractors, the primes and the subs, that they get paid timely once those invoices are submitted. And also, if there's any subcontractors that are being utilized that were not originally submitted with the bid documents, subs that are just working on a contract but we don't have any record of their performance are not going to count towards the goal. Any additions, substitutions, or changes in utilizations have to be approved by my office. So please make sure people are actually undertaking all those efforts so we can really credit everybody for their good performance on the contracts. So compliance reviews, contract compliance reviews, this is a huge portion of what the office does. And this is in large part how we gauge participation on these contracts. So when anyone is awarded a contract, they of course need to keep copies of any subcontractor agreements that they have. Reports and documentations verifying payment to the businesses that they utilize to achieve the contract goals. This is crucial. You really need to make sure you have proof of payment, documentation of receipt of the said payments, so that when we get to this point, it's really easy to follow where you are. The code also allows for reports and documentations of other contracts where there's MBE and WBE utilization that aren't affected by the chapter. So that could be city contracts where there's been a waiver, but you still have participation, or just other contracts where you're showing that you do value participation. This stuff should be tracked by the agency while the contract is ongoing before it even gets to MWBOO. But once it does get to my office, we're looking at all contracts over $50,000 that require Board of Estimates approval. So this would be at extensions, renewals, amendments, and if there's any change orders that are high dollar as well.
How often are agencies doing this, Chiefundy?
There's some agencies that are very good at this, and there's some that still have some work to do. I find in trainings that agencies that haven't been doing it, some of them were unaware of this requirement in the code, that they have this level of monitoring, and thought that it was being taken up by MWBOO or someone else within the process. But this is also tasked to the agency to do so.
Is it typical that this type of compliance, because this is like a skill set, subject matter expertise, that it's decentralized, that it's not like in one shop, but each agency is like responsible for doing their own particular compliance?
To be honest, I think I lack the information to say definitively whether that's commonplace. I understand your concern though, in terms of not having it be as centralized. We do, because everyone does not undertake this review and have this information, we do then verify every single payment from all primes and subcontractors that are on it, are on the contract when we go to do the review. And we make sure, like by either email or phone, that sub does confirm that they in fact receive the payment before we count that participation.
But what triggers a review?
So these reviews are triggered based on Board of Estimates action. So any renewals, extensions, or amendments.
Oh, so you go back and look at the prior to make, and that's how you determine the compliance level or not.
That's correct.
And you do that for every item that comes before the board?
Every item that comes before the board that has goals placed on it. So if it has waivers, that's how we don't necessarily know if there was any participation. But we do that individual verification. We tally up that dollar amount and the requisite percentage under the contract. We look back at, so we do that for the review period. So whatever that may be. So that could be a 1-year renewal, or that could be the original 5-year term of the contract as they're moving into a renewal. But we do the review period, and then we also look at the whole life of the contract. So what's happened previously, regardless of where we are in the review period. So if there was a 5-year original term contract, a 1-year review, even if they have compliance in the 1 year that we're in for that renewal now, going into the second renewal, let's say for another year, we say, well, what happened in the first 5 years? Just out of fairness, so that you at the Board of Estimates have a full understanding of, is this a isolated situation in this 1 year that for the times we're in that may be attributed to COVID or some other circumstances? Or is this a trend with this contractor or vendor where they're not really taking participation seriously? We also are now noting whether the overall contract compliance goal has been achieved thus far. Sometimes on contracts, you may not be that far into the you could be at you could be in this first renewal period, and they may have already achieved all of the money that we set at that goal to be paid to the MBE and WBE, and we just want to recognize that because they may not have that participation in the period, but they have in fact had the participation over the course of the contract. So we're trying to give a better totality of the circumstances so we can fairly assess where we are with the performance, not just like the snapshot, but for the big picture for that entire contract. Additionally, with these reviews, we also do reviews of release of retainage, and this is also something where we look at the percentages. When we do a partial release of retainage on construction contracts, or where a portion of the value of the contract is withheld, when they get to 50% completion and they have the requisite ratings, the contractor can request a partial release of that retainage. We make sure at that time there aren't any outstanding MBE, WBE issues. So any participation concerns, outstanding payments, late payment issues, before we say that that partial release can occur. If there are any concerns, of course, we're speaking with the project manager and the agency to make sure there's some sort of plan, or that they have an understanding of what's going on. Because again, they're more familiar with the contract, so they may know that on that particular contract, the minority and women's business participation is in a later phase. So they may not be concerned with the participation they have at that juncture because they know it's coming. But there are times where they say, no, that we should have actually had greater participation by now. They were supposed to do all of the initial survey work or whatever, what have you. So we just make sure that they're comfortable with where we are for actually achieving the goal in the long term. And then on the final release of retainage, it's a slightly different because we're at a point where the work is done and we're now in a warranty period or at the expiration of a warranty period. And we now have to evaluate, since there's no more room for participation, what transpired if it results in a shortfall, and evaluate whether it needs to be further action, if there needs to be a possible written recommendation to the board for further action and sanctions. And as I just mentioned, if we cannot resolve these, that would result in that written recommendation to the Board of Estimates. It really is our goal to resolve any sort of violations or concerns that could lead to violations via having these good communication, collaboration with the agency, and a dialogue with both the subcontractor and the prime about how we can have a plan to really resolve these issues. A lot of that typically is resolved when, with that emphasis on the stress that the administration is putting on contract participation, the fact that it is a code and contractually mandated obligation to get the participation, and the effects it could have on future work with the city. Typically, that normally prompts people to remedy whatever the issue is ongoing. But if it does not happen, the board does have the ability to take any or all of these sanctions against a contractor. So suspension of the contract, withholding of funds, rescission of the contract based on the material breach for violating this subtitle, refusing to accept a bid, suspending a bidder for up to 2 years, and the payment of liquidated damages. So these are severe penalties that can definitely have an effect on a business, and we sorely want to avoid those, but when it's warranted, we will make said recommendations to the Board of Estimates.
Do you know anything about the history of us taking out any of these actions on any of our contractors?
I have limited knowledge on it, but it's my understanding that these penalties have not been frequently imposed or even requested by my office.
I just wanted to make sure we said that on the record. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. President. I do intend to seek further enforcement and to make sure contractors know that we are watching and holding people accountable. And I am finding that message is getting across already, because there are board actions that have been held up to resolve any sort of questions or concerns we have about participation. And that's been something that your office, the other members of the Board of Estimates, the comptroller, the city administrator, we've had a lot of support in making sure that people are taking this seriously. So I definitely appreciate that. There is also a possibility for agencies to be held responsible for non-compliance. This is something that obviously we do not intend to get to. We've got excellent agency partners that have been really doing a lot to improve. We've been undergoing these trainings, so I'm sure we won't get to this, but if we had a history and an inability to resolve with the agency head and in collaboration with the rest of the administration, we would potentially need to make written recommendations to the board as well. Now, we alluded to this earlier, B2G, the Diversity Compliance Monitoring Software. This is a software that is utilized by a lot of offices nationwide. There are some competitors, but this is one of the ones that is one of the top softwares to really track participation and monitor contracts. And it's going to be a huge improvement for MWBOO and will assist us citywide in monitoring contracts. And when we do go live, I mean, right now we have a CityBuy, the city's online marketplace, but soon to be replaced by the new latest and greatest Workday. And also with agencies moving to Unifier Enterprise as well, they will all integrate with the software. And we're going to have forthcoming announcements in the near future about training both internally for the agency and their contract administrators, and externally for contractors and vendors that do business with the city. And just to highlight a few of our recent training efforts, we really have been placing this emphasis on communicating our process and procedures internally and externally. One of the things we've done recently is an update to the website, law.baltimorecity.gov/MWBOO. It's recently been revised. I hope that you find it to be a lot more easier to navigate and provide a lot more information to you, more readily accessible. We have revised the FAQs to really address a lot of frequent questions that I receive on a regular basis. And it's really one of those things that I recognize that the reason we're getting these questions is that the information is not easily found and people don't feel like they have the information. So we wanted to make that change to really assist the businesses. And MBEs, WBEs, they can do virtually everything that they need to do from the site, with applying for certification, renewals, expanding their services with additional certification codes, updating contact information, submitting questions, and of course, searching out our directory. We have been engaging in agency trainings. We've done 9 agency trainings since August, and we have an additional 4 scheduled through December. These have been really great opportunities to just go through a lot of the information about the office, the role of the agency, and to field and answer any questions that may exist while we're all together in a collaborative setting. So that's been really good. We've also been had a huge benefit from agencies that have allowed us to join their contract workflow meetings on a regular basis. And in that's really one of our forward-looking ways that we can see things in the short term that are upcoming on the Board of Estimates agenda that may have any sort of concerns that may require additional meetings regarding participation and ways that we can improve, but also long-term when we're looking at contracts that are just at the beginning of the life cycle, when they're drafting the scopes of work and starting a new solicitation. So that's something that we've been working on and really have been fortunate to work with several agencies in that regard. We've also done informational training outreach and events Regarding certification, we've done one with the Southwest Baltimore partnership that does great development throughout the city. M&T Bank's 0 to 100 Fall Accelerator Program, and also DPW's Office of Boards and Commissions Small Business Development Growth by Design Training Program. And both of those are like business incubator programs that provide training and assistance to grow and have successful businesses. And I've been fortunate to give presentations to both of those bodies to give them another piece to being successful and doing business with the city and to be able to grow by getting their certification. General outreach, this is some additional efforts we've been doing. We've been able to partner with Housing and Community Development. We recently addressed their Community Catalyst Grant recipients at their orientation so that they could have a good overview on the front end of MWBOO requirements and what is expected of them for participation on their projects. We've worked with the Maryland Washington Minority Companies Association. They recently had a reception for DPW Director Mitchell, and they were nice enough to allow me to give some remarks to their membership. Recently, just past week, we had a panel with the Information Technology Industry Councils. They had a procurement and acquisition innovation focused on advancing M/WBE procurement reform. And this is a really great international tech association that Director Paul Taylor of the Mayor's Office was able to join me. Oops, excuse me, not too far ahead. And also the Tony Reed from the Bureau of Procurement joined me on that panel as well. And this is an organization that has tons of national companies, and we were really able to talk about the benefits of doing business in Baltimore. And it's really a who's who in tech. This was an exciting opportunity for us to be there because as we talk about expanding, not just the directory, we want to expand specific sectors, and tech is one of them. But this is a group that has members that are from Amazon, Apple, Google, IBM, Microsoft, Motorola, Zoom, Visa, MasterCard, Twitter, Xerox, Samsung, Lenovo, Intel, Dropbox, Dell, HP, Lexmark, Facebook, Iron Mountain, Ernst & Young, and then Baltimore's own full stack digital services firm, Fearless. So it was a great lineup of businesses, and that's not even all their members, but it was a ton of people in the tech sector that we were really able to sell the city and what we're trying to do to get additional participation throughout the procurement process. So it was a really great opportunity. I also recently, with Director Taylor, joined Councilwoman Ramos at her District 14 virtual town hall to discuss MWBOO business development and equity in the procurement process as well. I really try to make sure I have make time to assist, and we're meeting regularly with contractors and subcontractors to really hear anyone out on any issues, questions, concerns they have, and especially their comments on how the office can improve. I really value the comments of the community and things that they believe we can do to serve them better. So that's been something that we take a lot of time to do in our schedule. So here's the information, contact information for the office. Again, the website, law.baltimorecity.gov/MWBOO, and it's just -FAQ for the frequently asked questions. If you don't see the information that you need, if you hit the contact MWBOO link, that'll get the question directly to us, and that is the best way to communicate with us. And also, again, that disparity study link there as well. So I will turn that back over to you for any questions that you may have about any portions of the presentation or any other topics that you'd like to cover.
Thank you, Chief Lundy. I have a couple quick questions, and then we're going to jump to some other council members and just do a round robin. What role does your office play with ARPA dollars?
So because ARPA it's federal dollars and there's no actual city dollars, that is one of the things that is exempt from goals being placed on it, as a matter of course from the code. But I have met with the Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs. I have given them a presentation regarding the requirements for our contracts, and they are working when it's practicable to try to enter into commitments to comply to put goals on those contracts. But
are we tracking that in any way? Is your office tracking that in any way?
Yes, I do get notified and have to execute the commitment to comply whenever we're entering into those.
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
I have to sign off on the commitment to comply whenever we enter into those. So I do have copies of all the commitments thus far.
For
And
the ARPA dollars?
yes, that's correct, Mr. President.
Okay, so, I was under the impression that, so you are intimately involved in if there is a contract that's put out there and the participation goals and the compliance associated with those goals.
Yes. So what we're doing is it's another voluntary engagement at that time because I don't have the authority to put it on the federal dollars. But they're communicating with me regularly about contracts that they believe would be appropriate to enter into those commitments to comply, and we're doing so. In terms of the monitoring, just to make sure I'm clear, we're not as much monitoring those agreements though, because there is an outside monitoring team that the Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs has contracted with that's going to be overseeing the equitable distribution of all the ARPA funds and tracking all of that.
Got it. Is there a centralized database, or will this platform that you mentioned earlier, will that track like all of the waivers and sole source contracts going forward?
It will not exactly, no. It's something that we're now doing via our smart sheets. And that's something that we're going to be rolling out to the rest of the agencies. Right now, we're just doing it with BOP. But as our new compliance officers coming on board, we're going to have that tracking for all the agencies. So what we get is we have a monthly report that we generate that actually says for currently just BOP, how many requests they have for waivers, contract compliance reviews, bid participation forms. So we're able to see how many waivers are being requested on a monthly basis. And we are going to roll that out to all the contracting agencies so we'd be able to see per agency the waivers, for example.
Why wouldn't we just put that in the platform that you guys are having developed?
The way the platform works, they're more so it's more so going to be tracking the payments, but it's not going to necessarily be tracking our requests for reviews, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but a waiver should be just like a payment. It's just that there is no transaction. There's no like in and out. It's just kind of sitting there as a waiver.
Yeah, that's something that, again, we're still developing that the system. We're approaching the final stages, so that's definitely something I'll take up with the vendor and see if we could capture that in the system as well.
Okay. Again, if there's any help that the council can provide on that, or kind of look at the recommendations associated with the task of them developing it, something I'm definitely interested in trying to look at and support you out with. And just also remember the other piece of that is disaggregation by agency, department, but then also by like task or type of industry. One of the key things that I constantly focus on is professional services. A lot of times when we talk about, particularly for the development deals, not necessarily stuff that you're talking about through procurement, but we missed this huge piece of professional services that's a huge opportunity for minority women, local owned firms to participate in, that we kind of look past, with the typical construction type of jobs.
Yeah, Mr. President, I do want to take an opportunity, since you brought up private development, to spotlight the Weller Development Company and the work they're doing over at Port Covington, because they've been excellent partners with participation. They've exceeded their goals thus far and have, I believe the number is $108 million is going to MBEs and WBEs on their project. So they've really been instrumental in showing that people can do private development in Baltimore and still prioritize participation and also be great partners to the community, because they've also made tremendous investments to South Baltimore as well.
And that leads me into my next and final questions. Just as far as like the fake pass-throughs, I mean, that's an issue everywhere else that has like real compliance that is established and set up. I don't know if we're necessarily identifying them, smoking them out. I guess what are the next steps moving forward that some of these fake minority women companies that are just serving as pass-throughs for these larger primes that we're able to identify and hold them accountable?
Yeah, that's something that we're investigating currently, and we're trying to do as much as we can to identify those. One of the ways that we're doing that, of course, would be to put more scrutiny on the application process on the front end. Some of these businesses, though, the problem is that they look good, not just on paper, but even with site business and things, they look good at the time of certification, and then the nature of the business may change to benefit themselves as a pass-through organization. So when the resources allow, I would like to be doing more periodic site visits and periodic reviews to just be able to see if people are in fact complying with the code.
Because at the end of the day, our goals and what we're saying we're doing are only as good as the compliance and enforcement. So we can say that we're at 40% minority participation, but if we don't have the right resources and mechanisms in place to ensure that the compliance is there, and then if no one's afraid because there's absolutely no enforcement, then, you know, numbers are numbers, right?
Mr. President, that's very true, and that's definitely the tone and sentiment that we have to make sure is not pervasive within the city, and we have to take those additional steps so that people do understand that we are watching, monitoring, and willing to take enforcement efforts.
Well, I thank you for your leadership, Chief Lundy. You've always been extremely responsive to the council, and we truly appreciate that level of partnership, but more importantly, your presence in such an important area as it relates to moving our city forward. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to questions from the council. First, I'd like to go to Madam Vice President Sharon Gray Middleton. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Mr. Lundy, for that presentation that you gave. I picked up some new things, and I just kind of have, I guess, just one question. And I apologize if I missed you saying this, but are there plans to really update your website and just kind of really make it give the person a better experience in just locating and finding things and completing forms? And is it going to be kind of modernized and friendly for feedback? Because I'm not feeling that comparing it to other counties and their websites. Is there consideration in doing that? Or
Yes,
have you already started?
yes, Madam Vice President, we have started. So the updates and revisions that I referred to, that has occurred literally within the last week and a half. So it's very, very recent. So you might not have seen the new and improved version, but even if you did, and that's still the position, I think that's fair. This is really our first step of trying to improve that web-based presence and feeling. And I do intend to make it even more robust and have even more resources there. But I did not want to wait too long, because the thing that I'm seeing and interacting with the business community is that we are having these repeated questions and concerns. And I really want to make sure the information got out there as soon as possible without any additional delay.
Okay, it looks like, but I just a suggestion, and if you could kind of work closely with the Office of Innovation, I think they could help with you in really making the website robust and just giving the person a good experience, a welcoming experience. I want to say, I think it would be very helpful.
Well, I definitely appreciate that, Madam Vice President. And BSID has been instrumental in working very quickly to get us the updates that we have thus far. I know CIO Carter is an excellent partner, and I know I can get with his team as time allows to get us to that next step and the next level. And hopefully people will find some additional resources, even with our configuration now, but we are definitely not done, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. I see the cameras of Councilwoman Ramos, Councilman Bullock, and Councilman Burnett on. I'll go to you first. Councilman Ramos, do you have any questions?
Yes, Mr. President, thank you very much. I have a question that I asked at my town hall that I thought everybody would be interested in. Chief Lundy, thanks again for spending time with us the other night. the state procurement breaks down the minority goals by category. So there's like 10% Hispanic, 25%. I'm making the numbers up, but they're all categorized. And so why don't we do that here? And if we did that, what would be the impact on sort of all the compliance monitoring and all of that? Would that mean that contractors have to do 10% Hispanic and or you try as the compliance to try to make sure that you're getting to all of the goals?
So thank you, Councilwoman Ramos, and thank you again for the invitation to the town hall. This is something with sub goals that the code does permit, but it does limit it to contracts in excess of $1 million. It is something that we can do, and I'm looking into doing it a lot more. The thing we have to do though is make sure that in order to place those sub goals, we have to have that market research to have that corollary between the certified MBEs and WBEs that are available for those services, to be able to plug in and say we need, or really MBEs, to say that we need the sub goal for African American or Hispanic Americans. We need to know how many firms exist to calculate that goal. So it's something that I can't say precisely why it hasn't been utilized more so in the past, but I do know currently it's something that we just have not had enough time and resources thus far to do all that identification to set those goals up. But it is something that I'm very much looking to do.
But the disparity study doesn't do that for us?
It surely will give a good breakdown, and that may be that if we have not already undertaken it by then, that may be the catalyst that causes us to have that sector breakdown of additional information that we can utilize to show where there has been that disparity. The study is definitely going to be very, very useful. It is a tool that's going to shape what we do going forward in terms of the effectiveness of the goals, if the annual goals need to be adjusted, and if there's particular subsets like you're speaking of that need further attention. I do know in certain industries we are definitely seeing only certain minorities are being utilized, and for as much as it is an MBE goal, we don't want any particular sector of that classification to be left behind because they're not getting participation. So even within MBE, we want to have equity. And we want to make sure that all of the minority groups are represented throughout all of our contracting sectors and not just some in certain aspects.
Right, that's kind of where I'm going, is to have, so that we can measure each classification based on, category, but also understanding if we're actually getting there, and not having one dominate the other. So that's where I was kind of going with that. And then we didn't talk about this the other night, but you did mention that LGBT is in the disparity study, which for my colleagues, the Amari's Procurement Act initially talked about a disparity study, the amendment. And so now we know after the fact that now we actually are having a disparity, it is already included in the disparity study, which I'm grateful for. So I'm glad that's being done. And then that's my two questions, I guess, already.
I was going to let you go on. I thought you was finished, but I was going to chime in. That's why we didn't move forward with that bill, Councilman Ramos, because it would have been putting the cart before the horse because there's already a disparity study that's factored in.
We didn't know that at the time, but anyway, it's fine. We'll take care of it later. But just one last thing. We are a majority minority city. And so I still am troubled by the fact that we call this minority contracting. And I wondered we still have, ways to go because we want to make sure that everybody gets opportunities, but we want to make sure that our contractors that are leading these businesses, contractors of color, also get a chance to be primes. So can you talk a little bit about the fact that our contractors of color can actually be primes and how that works? And then whether or not we need to play with the name a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. So of course, MBEs and WBEs can serve as primes on any city contract. Our primary thing with the goals is saying that's who the subcontracting opportunities need to go to based on that percentage. But any MBE or WBE can be a prime on any contractor that are, of course, pre-qualified and qualified to bid on. We really encourage that. The goal is for those businesses to get large enough, whether they begin as subcontractors or not, but that they're large enough to be competitive in the marketplace on those larger city contracts. So that's definitely what we're striving for with the program, is building that capacity of the business over time so that they really get into that position that they themselves can then be utilizing MBE and WBE subcontractors. In terms of the nomenclature, yeah, when you raised this the other day, I thought this was an interesting point and concept. We definitely are a majority minority city. The language that we utilize with minority business enterprises is our code language. And we mirrored at the time, I believe, the federal language. But it is something that would be worth considering whether we should change those designations. And we surely could change the designations to be more inclusive and not really be contrary to our dynamic where we are the majority within the city.
Thank you. I appreciate it. That's it for me. Thank you, Mr. President.
No, thank you. And just one clarifying point, Chiefundy, to Councilwoman Ramos's question. The minority prime contractor still has to comply with the Minority Women Enterprise Goals and Compliance Agreement, right?
That is correct, Mr. President. It is applicable to all contracts. And even if it's awarded to an MBE or WBE, like just based on that award, they're not exempt from that. They still have to also comply. That's why it is neutral in that way, regardless of the race, gender, or color of whoever is awarded the contract. It is still applicable.
I just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page. Thank you for saying that, Chiefundy. Next up, I'm going to go to Councilman Bullock. Councilman Bullock, do you have any questions?
Oh, yes, thank you, Mr. President. My question is related to something you asked earlier and something related to Councilwoman Ramos's point. So, Chief, early on, you mentioned the MBE goals of 27% and WBE at 10%. Given the demographics of our city, I'm just curious, how did those numbers get decided upon? What were the factors involved with those numbers? And is there any flexibility with that 27 and 10%?
So that's all grounded in the last disparity study. And really that's been ongoing. We've been setting those annual goals, but it's really based on the last study that's given us the guidepost of the data that was available from vendors and the level of the disparity. As we're doing the new study, we are going to be in a position to really look at those goals, and we're going to have to reevaluate those goals based on what comes back from the study. It's unclear, they haven't revealed any conclusions yet. They're still literally in the data right now, but it's unclear where the goals are going to be. I definitely think that they could increase. I surely would not mind if they increased, but we do have to tie it to that data of the disparity that still exists in the marketplace, and then make that determination.
Okay, and that's helpful. Just one quick follow-up. So forgive me if I missed this earlier, but when was that last disparity study? And then what's the timing you think in terms of the figures coming out in this current one?
Oh, yes. So it's 2007 was the last one that was completed. And I did neglect to state when the new one is coming out. I believe that's going to be February of 2022. So we're almost there, but they are on track currently and still in the process of speaking to vendors, compiling the data to see the payment information. And one of the things that I also neglected to say is when they're doing this disparity study, the marketplace that I spoke of may be expanded. They may find that there's other vendors that have been subject to that disparity that are outside of the counties that we have currently. So there could be other counties that are included that we don't have. For example, like a PG county could potentially become part of the marketplace. And that also would lead to us having a kind of a natural way to expand the directory if we then had another large marketplace or another large county jurisdiction that would become part of our marketplace. So that's where the disparity study is definitely key and one of the ways that really can help us shape where we're going. But it's all based on that data and their study to show whether there's really businesses that have been affected. Because to keep it narrowly tailored, we can't just rope in some of these counties if businesses aren't being affected or even doing business with the city. But they're speaking to both vendors, organizations, and doing different interviews, analysis, and also looking directly at our contracting payment data to see who gets utilized on the contracts and how much they've been paid and utilized over time.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Next up, I'll go to Councilman Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you for this informative presentation, Dr. Lundy. The one issue I wanted to raise, and we obviously talked about it, but the issue of MBE primes having to still meet goals and sort of discussion around, like, if they're able to provide all of the work, how can we make sure that that they can have a better leg up instead of sort of having, not that we want them to circumvent this process, but if there's an opportunity to build their capacity without having to take on additional partners in work. If they're already MBE, they're already a Baltimore-based business, how can we better grow their capacity? And obviously, there, in our previous conversations on this, there's been discussion about the potential impact on small businesses. So I guess it's sort of a two-part question. How do we build capacity so that MBE primes can, have a better shot at getting larger contracts, and also really address capacity building for smaller contractors?
Thank you, Councilman. We discussed this in the context of the self-performance credit previously, and this is a complex issue because it cuts in a couple different directions. If we were to allow for a MBE or WBE prime to self-perform the entirety of the goals, then that does take away an opportunity from a small MBE or WBE to be a subcontractor on that. The position of the program has been that we really want to, it's a program for small minority and women-owned businesses. So we want to grow that capacity via work on contracts. Of course, starting off as a subcontractor, continuing to work on more contracts and get experience and expertise, and then eventually getting to the point where your business is successful enough that you can bid and serve as a prime, and do that long enough so that you can then be a large prime that's able to get on really big city contracts. I think in terms of building capacity, it is really kind of that stair-step approach. And the reason why I'm hesitant to allow a prime to just fully perform a goal is that I really think the goal of the program has to have that eye towards small businesses and towards allowing people to continue to get those opportunities. And we're all about finding the opportunities for the participation, whether that be emergency procurements, things that had waivers previously. We really just want to give the opportunities so that they can continue to do better and be bigger. Another thing I would say for building capacity I'm in discussions and trying to find a way for us to bring back to the city is some aspect of a training or apprenticeship program that would allow even somewhat larger prime contractors to gain additional skill and expertise on some pieces that they may be missing to take them to the next level. And I do have some partners in the business community that have expressed interest in joining with us and partnering to be able to do things like this. The Weller Development Corporation in Fort Covington, Mason-Dixon companies are a couple of developers that have said that they would be more than willing to assist us in doing some training and implementing whatever changes and support we need. So that's something that I'm going to be speaking to city leadership on how we can best encapsulate this and whether this should be a contract requirement or something that's voluntarily undertaken. But it is something that in pursuing equity, we really do have to focus on that skill building because sometimes for as much as we get opportunities, we also have businesses that are not as prepared as they should be when they're working on contracts. And again, my office doesn't certify anybody's skill set or expertise, but we do want, in the pursuit of having a viable vendor community of MBEs and WBEs, we do need to worry about the expertise and the reputation and the way that they approach their business so that they can be viable for an extended period of time and continue to contribute to Baltimore.
No, agreed, and and that's why I sort of wanted to have this conversation here, because I think it's definitely important. I do understand the small business impact as it relates to goals, but the other thing that I think all of us would love to see is that real capacity building in order to help our very few MBE primes in the city, and to grow their ability to take on bigger means that capacity needs to happen all the way around. Capacity building needs to happen all the way around, that training piece as well. The other question I had was just, I guess, generally, and you touched on it a little bit, but I was having some connection problems with the disparity study. I guess, can you walk through briefly, if you've already gone in depth on this, how that informs the work? How does it inform the program? Obviously, the results come out, it sounds like February. What's the timeline for when we can expect to see, I guess, changes to the operations? I guess, what are the outcomes that the agency is hoping for, and when can we sort of begin to see some revisions to the program as a result of that?
Yes. So they're undertaking it now. It is going to be out in February. What they're really doing is that analysis of all the data really tells us how well we're doing with participation, how much we're remedying these ongoing effects of prior discrimination, and where that reaches to. So when they come back, they're going to have recommendations regarding how we can further the program and other generalized things like record retention, and just things that are good governance and best practices for the office that they see that would allow us to do better. So when they give us the report and have those recommendations, my office will be doing a full analysis of the report, of all the recommendations, and likely, obviously not having seen them, but likely we'll move forward on implementing any recommendations that they have that they feel are sound and necessary for us to have best practices and move the office to the next level. I will be trying to implement those changes as soon as I possibly can, hopefully within at least having proposals to move forward within 60 days of receiving that. But it is something, depending on the nature of what the recommendations are, they may be things that are outside of my control, and I may need assistance from your body. I may need assistance from the administration to make those changes. But it is something where whatever changes they have that they believe would be beneficial and bring greater equity in the process, I'm all for following all of their recommendations in full to ensure that we have a better program.
And you answered my follow-up question. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. The only other council person I see is Councilwoman Ramos. I'm sorry, Councilwoman Porter. Do you have any questions?
No, Councilman Burnett actually asked my question related to technical assistance. Director Lindy, if you can, if we have some time on the call or a follow-up conversation, I'd love to know what type of like interagency or interdepartmental technical assistance that you all use, along with, I know you mentioned private industries, but can you mention other city agencies that you work with to provide technical assistance for businesses?
Oh, sure, of course. Director Taylor, who's here, his office is instrumental in assisting and helping businesses. Baltimore Source Link, which is their online repository for information, is a great resource for any MBE or WBE in the area that's trying to determine how to do business with the city and how to also grow and develop their business. He is much more on the business development side. And that's really one of the great resources that they have. My office is not as much in development. It's more so getting people involved and what, get them into the party to be able to do business with the city. But his office is a great resource. So I would definitely say first and foremost his office. The Bureau of Procurement, of course, and the City Buy online marketplace is another great resource for anybody that wants to do business with the city. And they have a lot of great resources about doing business with the city, what you need to do to be able to go through the contracting process. And right now, we're really doing a lot to try to interact with some of the agencies that have shown a need. So obviously, BSID on a lot of their contracts, we're really, I meet with them weekly We're working on trying to do additional outreach and planning events. Housing and community development, obviously, it's very important. It's one of the mayor's pillars for equitable neighborhood development. So working with them on their community catalyst grants and community block development grants, and really just having that interaction so that people are familiar with our requirements and ways that we can assist them in getting their mission done. I'm really trying to show all the agencies how we can partner and not see, unfortunately, my office has been seen as a hindrance at times by people when they're trying to move through the procurement process. I'm trying to really have this educational outreach so people understand the code mandates first and foremost, but really the importance of why we have to undertake this still in this day and age. And really the importance that the administration, the council, and the city as a whole was really placing on this to ensure that we all see the value here in a more diverse, equitable procurement process, and that the city is better when we have this type of participation.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Taylor, I didn't know you were on the call. Just want to commend you for your longstanding work. I'm very familiar with it down here in South Baltimore. So I don't have any other questions, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Are there any other questions or concerns from any other members?
I have a question, Mr. President. Councilman Torrance.
Okay, Councilman Torrance, the floor is yours.
Thank you. My question is both to Mr. Taylor and also to Chief Lundy. One of the questions I have we thought about requiring primes to state in their proposals how they will build capacity of their subcontractors, especially for both our minority primes, but also primes in general? Because often what I found from working with minority businesses is that there is no mentorship, capacity building, protege type of development that's happening, especially in whether no matter who the prime is. So how are we doing to require and facilitate that?
So Councilman, that's something that I'm really working on, and that's where we do have to develop some aspect of a training or apprenticeship program. And I do think, like you're saying, that it should be added into contracts. There are some great contractors that are undertaking additional efforts to show how to build that capacity. I was remiss earlier when I didn't name one of our prominent MBE that is able to service prime contractors, RE Harrington. They have, over the course of many years, really mentored a lot of businesses and really undertaken a lot of efforts to help people build their capacity and to be of assistance. But right now, because it's not mandated within the contracts and we don't have an official program, it really is left to the goodwill and nature of some of those prominent businesses and larger established contractors to kind of take businesses under their wing and show them some of the ways that they can do that. But surely I am going to be having additional conversations throughout the city, and especially with Director Taylor, to talk about ways that we can reinstitute some of these programs and other creative ways that we can work on building capacity.
I'm not sure if you can hear me. I know my video has been crazy, but we are also, this is Paul Taylor speaking, we've also been working with some of the prime contractors, especially the larger ones, to institute programs. One of the ones that we're finalizing some steps on right now is a mentor protege with the Weller Development Corporation, who's doing the Port Covington project. So that's one of the ways that we're doing that. But we have on a regular basis programming around capacity building for our minority contractor community. We have instituted things like bidding and estimating classes. We work with DPW. The curriculum that DPW is using is one that we help develop that they're using for their growth by design program. So there are things that we're doing on a regular basis to engage with that. The program that we do with 0 to 100, that's another capacity building program. Some of them from the most nascent companies all the way to more mature companies who may need help with things like bidding and estimating and project management. So there's just a couple of things that we're doing in addition.
Perfect. And my next question is, have we thought about refining master contracts so that we have smaller scopes so that a large number of minority and owned businesses would qualify as well and win those contracts?
Yes, that's definitely something that I've been talking about. Just kind of generally debundling and breaking apart some of these larger and citywide contracts. It's not always necessitated that we contract in that manner. Sometimes that's the way we're pursuing. But I will say there are situations where they can't be debundled, they can't be broken out based on the vendor and the way they choose to engage in business with the city. So to the extent that we can, it is something that I'm emphasizing to try to break out contracts. I know Director Mitchell at DPW, he's really working and undertaking efforts to try to find ways to break up some of those citywide contracts that they have. And also we're exploring the ability to tier some contracts to give opportunities for smaller businesses. So there are some creative things that we're looking at doing as we're going through the procurement process.
Thank you, Chief Lundy. That's all I have, Mr. President.
I think there was one other person. Video's not on.
Mr. President,
Chairman Stokes.
how y'all doing? Sorry about being late. I was doing some running around, doing something for community. But Mr. President, you did touch on about those I guess you call them fake pass-throughs, and I hope we really vet that, because we have some great nonprofits, but we have some that didn't do well in terms of some of our they use some of them as a funders, and what happened was they could not get their money because I just think we don't vet those nonprofits when we talk about pass-through enough, because we don't want what happened to some of the other programs that was through the youth fund now are not in business anymore because we were using nonprofits that had a nonprofit. I mean, they were funders, but it ended up that it didn't work for those persons who were using them as pass-through. So I'm glad you did mention that, and I think we need to vet that a lot more this time also. Thank you.
Any other questions or concerns from members of the council? Well, Chief Lundy, the last thing I'm gonna say is, what is it, CB4? What was that name of that system?
B2G.
B?
2G.
2G. Yes. Again, I hate to keep saying this. Any help that the council can support you on, and as it relates to like going through whatever the deliverable task is for the system, please don't hesitate. But we're two things that have come out on this call that we're really interested in, and hopefully there's some follow-up, is it would be really nice if somehow we can incorporate waivers and sole source right directly in that database. That way we can go through and just see all the waivers by department, by contract type, all with the participation percentages that it'll be, mapping out and tracking. Really interested in that. And then also, again, disaggregating the data by agency, department, as well as performance type is something that's really important to the council moving forward. Again, thank you for all of your responsiveness. Always staying engaged with the council. We look forward to continue to work with you. If you have any questions or concerns of us, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Council President, thank you so much for this opportunity, and I really appreciate all of the support from your office and the focus that you're putting on continuing to get minority and women's business participation on all of our contracts. So I definitely appreciate that and the support of you and the other council members.
Thank you. And then before we drop, Mr. Green, I believe there aren't any folks with their hands raised or anything from a general public perspective with questions.
No, sir, I don't see any hands raised or anything. No.
All right. Well, we'll give it like another 2 minutes. If there's anyone that is listening that would like to testify and provide comment to the council or to Chief Lundy at this time, we'll give you the opportunity to raise your hand to do so. And while we're waiting for those hands to be raised, if there's anyone who's called in via audio, you can unmute yourself at this point and provide any testimony that you would like. So just for the purpose of ensuring that we provide the general public an opportunity to do so, we're going to take 2 minutes and wait for any hands to be raised or anyone to click off audio. At that point, we're going to adjourn the hearing if we do not have any public testimony. This concludes the hearing of the Baltimore City Council with the MWBOO office. We look forward to some follow-up. Mr. Chief Lundy, again, thanks for your responsiveness, your willingness to come before the council.
Thank you, Mr. President. I really
As well as thank you as well, Mr. Taylor, as always being aware.